I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the panel members first. I'm Marcel Larondo, I'm the chair. Neil Harden to the far left. Ed Zawatsky right next to me. Jennifer Martins is our assessor today.
Actually, it's
Catherine is our assessor today. Well, I was reading Jennifer was on here.
Yeah, she's there.
I'm going, I sort of did a double take. Catherine Smith is our assessor today, and our administrative assistant today will be Kara Belshaw. We'll be hearing applications for revision of assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of properties are not considered evidence of a market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council as independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close, and after all the applications have been heard, the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. And we just ask we shut off our phones, and mine will be the first one. Swear it in, please.
Please state your name. Do you swear the evidence you will present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. And I guess I'll just distribute this. You swear?
Yes.
Please state your name. Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. You guys will be dealing with both of these at the same time, I'm guessing? Yep.
The first one we're dealing with is Plessis Road one?
Yep. It's the same property, 2 different years.
Yeah.
Different references.
When you are ready, Catherine.
So the subject is a 29.84 acre vacant lot. It's located on Plessis between Grassy and Clodonan Meadows. It's an unserviced lot. It's appealing for two separate reference years. So I provided you with a package for 2017, a package for 2018. We'll do 2017 first. 2017 has a reference date of April 1st, 2014. So there are different comparables for 2017 as there are for 2014 or 17. That's confusing. So for 2017, yes, I said it's an unserviced lot, no sewer water lines along the Plessis. The property does have an east border of 685 square feet frontage on Plessis Road. The assessment for 2017 is $1,625,000 or $54,463 per acre. The reference date for April 1st, 2014. So the first page in my brief is the list of the comparables. The second page will show you the location of the comparables on the map of the city, all in the mostly eastern section of the city. And then the next 4 pages are close-up pictures of the comparables, just to give you an idea of what they are and where they are. So, to just, comparable one, it's, I'm just gonna call it comparable one, I won't go through the PID there. It's adjacent to the property on Plessy Road, that you can see that in the second page, the photograph shows the subject, as well as the comparable one just north to it. The difference between the subject and comparable one is, of course, the frontage. The comparable one has only a small frontage there on Plessy Road. This comparable sold in it's an older sale, it's 4 years before the reference date, sold in September 2010, and it sold for $645,000 or $30 an acre. Comparable 2 is on Ravelston Avenue in the Peguis neighborhood, which is just south of the grassy neighborhood where the subject's located. It's a 10.11 acre lot. At the time of sale, back in 2012, it was the only road in existence at the time of sale was Ravelston. It has since been developed. It sold in November of 2012 for $725,000 or $71,698 per acre. Comparable number 3 is 1325 Ravelston, also located in the Peguis neighborhood, and this comparable 3 is next to comparable 2. It is a 20-acre lot, 20.38 acres. And at the time of sale, Peguis and Ravelston were the only roads there. It sold in August 2012 for $812,000 or $40,000 an acre. And the last comparable is on Templeton, further north. And
That was number 3 you just did, right?
Yeah, sorry, slow down.
Okay.
Okay, the comparable 4, 1770 Templeton. A smaller 10-acre lot. It's, again, an older sale, about 4 years before the reference date, sold in June 2010 for $550,000 or $50,000, or almost $55,000 per acre. So with these 4 comparables, the sale price range of the comparables, which were all unserviced vacant lots, from $30,000 per acre to $71,700 per acre, support the assessed value of $54,463 per acre. That's the brief for 2017. Do you want to go with 18, or I guess questions always?
Marcello, questions?
Yes. In terms of your comparables, did you look to see whether any development plans or zoning amendment applications had been submitted after the sales? Whether these have been developed since?
I believe comparable 1 has not been developed. You can see from the photos that there is development in comparable 2, I believe in 3 and 4 as well. There is. I couldn't tell you exactly what year these streets would be in as of April 2016. So I'd say there is sort of imminent development happening in all but comparable 1.
And do you think that the R1L zoning is comparable to RR5 for Comp 2?
For Comp 2.
Or does that have dual zoning on it?
They're both RR residential. Oh, I see now. It looks like dual zoning. It doesn't make, the zoning that sits there at the time of sales is, I find it's not very binding, because it seems they all seem to be in close to where development had been before, so whether it's agricultural or RR5, I think what's more important is service or unserviced.
Those are my questions.
Okay.
Neil?
Okay, with, do you know if comps 2, 3, and 4 were land assemblies?
No, I don't.
you pay more for a land assembly if you were going to be so inclined? If you were looking to assemble for a subdivision?
As a developer, which I have experience being a developer, I guess depends how anxious you would go ahead with your developments.
Okay. So wouldn't comp one be your best comparable?
I'm not sure of that because it's such an old sale and there has been an increase in value. From that 2010, I think the 2010 is, if they were to sell again today, it would sell for, but we're talking about reference period, so, but even for the reference period of 2014, it's an older sale, so it's a similar comp in some ways in location. Doesn't have the frontage to a road, an existing road, but, so it's similar in some ways.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
Well, if comp one isn't your best comparable, what's the next best comparable in your mind?
Comparable 3 is also similar in size. Not such an old sale. That might be one where I put more weight on. I don't think we have any really stellar comparables here, so.
All right, thank you.
Is there a development agreement being applied for on the subject property at this time?
I didn't see any permits.
Comp one,
No.
nothing on that one. And
The others have since had some development.
the homes that are blocking comp one, those don't have sewer and water either, do they?
No, I don't believe they do.
Yeah, because that's Plessy's where it's dry. The lake, these properties don't have to pay for that until they do the subdivision, is that not correct?
I saw that property with the lake on it.
That's city land now.
That's city land, yeah. I guess they're waiting for that.
The drainage.
Waiting for something to change, development to happen. I believe the owners of the subject, I guess Marcel will know, I believe they're owners of one of the smaller properties along Plessy there.
Which one?
I think one of those ones just to the north of the frontage there, did they not own one or two of those little pieces there?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure, okay, that's fine.
So, tell me again why you think comp one isn't a good comparable because it doesn't have enough frontage?
Yes, there's a very little frontage there, and it's a much older sale. Trying to find.
Would the value not be incumbent upon the subject property for value? Because the roadways would all be interconnected between those two when it does get developed?
Sorry, say again?
When they develop that property, would it not be developed at the same time as the subject property?
I guess it'll be part of the overall plan.
Because they'll plan it all as one. Okay, no further questions. Marcello?
Okay. I'll start on page 3, site and property description. So this is an irregular shaped parcel of vacant land located on the west side of Plessy at the intersection of Plessy and Gun Road, north of the CPR main line. Surrounding land uses are predominantly residential to the south and west, and commercial to the east in the RM of Springfield. The parcel is approximately 29.8 acres and is zoned RR5. Go to the page 4, highest and best use. The appraisal of real estate third Canadian edition defines it as the reasonably probable and legal use of vacant land or unimproved property that is physically possible, appropriately supported, and financially feasible that results in the highest value. what you have to take into consideration when doing, looking at highest and best use is that it must be a legal use, it must be permitted under local administrative regulations, such as zoning and legislation. The use must be probable rather than speculative or conjectural. There must be a demand for such use, and then the use must be the most profitable for the entire property and generate the highest net return for the longest possible time. And looking at zoning bylaw 200/2006, RR5 districts provide areas for large lot residential development with limited agricultural uses. RR5 zoning has limited principal uses under the current bylaw. The following are the only principal permitted and conditional uses allowed for this zoning district. Accessory uses were not included. And in terms of the asterisks, that means that a use-specific standard applies in the zoning district. As you can see there, single-family detached, care homes, agricultural cultivation. Many of the uses tend to be institutional or community-oriented uses. Those tend to exist outside of the marketplace. So in our opinion, the highest and best use of this is low-density residential. The page over, you can see the Transcona West area structure plan, and you can see the arrow that points to the subject there. So the proposed use is low-density residential. As you can see by the big green P in the middle, there is a proposed park there, so parkland dedication for this area. On and in the subject. If you go to page 6, you can look at my sales. So I've used some sales that are larger parcels because I felt that this parcel was, again, at least 30 acres, or close to 30 acres. So the first one that I looked at, I'll let you go through the chart and I'll explain the no housing price index and the adjustments that I made on the sales. I'll go to the first index, index 1. This parcel is located east of Pembina Highway and north of LeMay Avenue in St. Norbert. This is a 29.5 acre lot that is partially wooded. There are no services in place and the property backs onto the Red River. Index 1 sold in February of 2011 for $11,577 an acre, and the site is zoned RR5. The next page over, you can see some pictures of it. And you can tell that it's probably prone to flooding and riverbank erosion there. You can see in the picture there. So maybe not the best property for development, especially along the riverbank there. You can see the proximity to the perimeter highway on Pembina Highway and see its growth location relative to it. The next one over on page 9 is index 2. This is the same one that the assessor had. This is my index 2, and located on Plessy Road, adjacent to the subject. This is a 21.47 acre parcel, zone RR5. There are no services in place. Index 2 sold in September of 2010 for $30,042 an acre. The next one over is index parcel 3. This is a multi-roll sale, so it included 4 roll numbers. And I've included them, I've outlined them in red to indicate where they are and how large they were. In total, they sold 33.44 acres sold for a price of $40,072 per acre. I'm going to get into this. Is in our opinion, this actually represents the high end of the market. So after reviewing additional materials on the sale that future development potential may have increased the value of these parcels. The purchaser submitted a plan of subdivision rezoning in June of 2013, the year following the purchase of the property. The land specific to this sale were successfully rezoned from R5 to R1, and this subdivision is now known as Crocus Meadows. And you can see the overlay of the actual plan of subdivision there. And on the next page over, you can see how this subdivision has progressed in just a few short years. Index 4 is located east of La Jemorier Boulevard and adjacent to the south perimeter. The parcel also lies due south of the Sage Creek development. The sale was registered July 27, 2011 for 37.72 acres. The parcel was zoned RR5 at the time of the sale. At the time of the sale, no services were in place, and the sale was reviewed. It represents a sale price of $26,511 per acre. Index 5 on page 14. This is known as 253 Cotelco Drive. Index 5 is located east of La Jemorier Boulevard and just north of the South Perimeter Highway. This sale occurred in October 2013 and sold for $11,107,100 for 101.91 acres, or $108,989 per acre. This sale was quickly followed by a zoning amendment application and development plan in March of 2014. This is also phase 9A of Sage Creek development. So as you can see with that one, we're talking only about a 5 months difference between the time that the property was purchased and when that development process started. On the next page over on 15, conclusion, I should have called it commentary, but so based on the research provided, our opinion is that for the 2017 assessment, the more relevant sales are indices 2 and 3 because of location. Note that special attention was placed on the sales selection, timing, and development in RR5 zone. The location of Index 2 is important because of its proximity to the subject. This property is located adjacent to the subject. It is an older sale, but we have made an adjustment on the sale based on Statistics Canada New Home Price Index. There is no horizon in terms of timing for zoning amendments or development application. Based on the Transcona West Structure Area Plan, low-density residential is planned for this site. The adjusted sale price suggests $35,181 per acre. This price is reflective of a sale that has a long-term horizon in terms of future development. There is no zoning amendment application in place, any development application or proposed plan. As such, the demand for this parcel is not as high as other parcels where there was a relatively short time frame for development from the sale to the first application. This will be explained in the following sale. Index 3 is located about 1.5 kilometers away from the subject. Index 3 is part of the Transcona West Structure Area Plan and the Alney-Ravelston Secondary Plan. Index 3 may have been influenced by development pressure surrounding it. Its relative proximity to La Jemorier Boulevard and surrounding land uses made low-density rural housing unlikely. Our subject, on the other hand, lies adjacent to low-density rural housing. In terms of timing, this sale, in our opinion, represents the high end of the market. It is clear that after reviewing additional materials on the sale that future development potential increased the value of these parcels. The purchaser submitted a plan of subdivision and rezoning in June of 2013, the year following the purchase of the property. Land specific to this sale were successfully rezoned from RR5 to R1. This subdivision is now known as Crocus Meadows. Index 5 is 253 Cotelco. Now this sale occurred on November 18th, 2013, and sold for $11,107,000 or $110,800 per acre. I believe there's a slight mistake there. It actually is $110,800 per acre. The rezoning and development application was dated March 12, 2014, a short 5 months after the sale. Index 5 is phase 9A of Sage Creek. We can see in this example that the timing of the subdivision was relatively short between the sale of the land and the actual development phase. The sale demonstrates that the shorter the time period between sale and development, the higher the price of land. Index 5 is relative to Index 4. So if you look at the sale chart on page 6, you can see that Index 4 is actually located right beside Index 5. So these two are the same type of land, ex-farm land, right beside each other. There's a 2-year difference in terms of the sale dates. But one had a horizon of about 5 or 6 years in terms of development, so it had a slightly lower price per acre. Now, the other one, Index 5, had a time frame of about 5 months between the sale and the start of the development phase in terms of the applications. So what we're saying essentially is that timing is very important in terms of the value of these properties. Where there is a high, where there is a larger time difference between the planning of subdivisions and rezoning, the higher the value will be when that time frame is short. Again, as I said, these two parcels were right beside each other, and there's a 2-year difference in terms of overall value: 30,355 and 110,800. That's a 265% increase over 2 years, where the land essentially lies right beside So we know that there's not a 265% increase in land there. That is essentially the timing that's working. The last point is the land use proposed for the subject. Based on what is in the Transcona West Structure Area Plan, the proposed use of the subject land includes parkland dedication. This would, in our opinion, severely diminish the land value. Second, if rezoning were possible, and we think it is possible down the road, because of its location near the CPR main line, the berm and setback requirements would come into play. We did an estimate based on our opinion. About 3 acres would be completely unavailable because of the berm and setback requirements there. Now, the question of the sale dates and time adjustments is a precarious one. The best option is always to have sales that are closest to the reference date of similar size, similar properties. Our research concluded there were no large acreage transactions with the R5 zoning that we could base anything meaningful on. So that was the first option. There were plenty of smaller acreage sales, which we didn't think were relevant to the property that we were looking at, so we didn't include them. Another option is to use sales of large acreages of like land, so R1, R2, RMF, and RMU. The problem with this is that it distorts the value because you're getting a higher density on those right away. And often there's already a planned subdivision on those parcels that have the R1, R2, RMF zoning on them. So we're talking about post versus pre-development. Second, the R1, RME zoning often, I've already mentioned that. We have chosen therefore not to use land sales of zoning where they represent a different sector in the market, and that's, by saying that it represents a different sector in the market, essentially I'm saying is that you can't compare R1 to RR5. The best option in our opinion would be to apply an inflationary factor in the absence of sales closer to the reference date. For this, there are two possibilities. One is to use paired sales, which there are none, or use some type of indexing value. That is the reason that we went with the new home price index. So what the new home price index looks at is contractor sales. So they're looking at the sale of contractor homes and land. They're separating the building value and land value. Statistics Canada has been doing this survey since the early 80s. So the index goes back to, I believe, 1981. I've included the chart of the index that I've used at the back in my appendix. Our estimate of value is therefore $35,181, and obviously sale or index to influence this sale. Because of its proximity to our subject, we feel that it represents the best option. If you look into the appendix, we've included all of the relevant sales here. Beyond the sales, sale 3 was also an interesting one because it included 4 parcels. It's a similar size as the subject, it's about 1.5 kilometers away, but the problem with this sale is that timeline in terms of sale to the first application for amendment of rezoning was within a year. And you can see the purchaser was actually a developer. Our property is obviously owned by a developer, but again, our property has been sitting there for quite some time undeveloped, and there is no horizon in terms of the first applications that are going to be put on this property. It's still much down the road. And you can see by what I've tried to say here is that timing of the applications is important because that does affect the value of the land. If you're looking at a 5 to 10 year horizon to development, you're not going to pay the same amount on a property that has a time or a horizon of, say, a few months to a year or 2 years. You're looking at a completely different market at that point. The next pages over are the subdivisions that I've included in the sales and subdivisions that have been, applied for. And over there, over on page 29, you can see that I've included the new housing price index. That's my presentation. Open to questions.
Catherine, questions?
What is their projected horizon for development for this lot?
I would say that at a minimum 5 years. So we've had some conversations with them. I think I alluded to that in my email with you, that I had some conversations with Qualico on this. It's definitely not any time soon. And this could be a factor of where they are in terms of their development in other areas of the city, but in terms of this area, they're nowhere near. Also recall that this is right on the cusp of the RM of Springfield, so again, the development is moving east in terms of the Transcona West structural area of land. The stuff that occurred along La Jamodia Boulevard happened first, and it's moving east. It's not there yet. So the timelines are not anytime soon. And again, I have to emphasize that there is no applications on this property. So we can't even start to talk about what this thing will be.
I'm just wondering if that's Qualico's, because they have their business going on other places, but if somebody else came in, like
Well, I guess the question is
Might be a different thing
whether
at
the
the time.
demand is there and whether the city will actually allow that construction to actually occur at this point. It's two different questions, but I don't think the demand is there at this point. It'll be there maybe in a few years, but again, this is what I'm talking about in terms of the timing. Subdivisions that had the closer horizons were the Bridgewater Forest. Those things were developed quite quickly. The Sage Creek is developing quickly. That's where a lot of the emphasis is. In the north part of the city, I forget what it's called, north of the Maples, that subdivision is also growing quite quickly. This area is not.
do you know the size of the park that there might be asked for in there? Some discussions.
I can't tell you.
If they know
because-
it's a park, I
Okay,
guess
so
that.
here's the issue with this, is that the city lays out what they want to be there, okay, in terms of the parkland dedication. But because there's no relevant timelines in terms of that horizon that I'm talking about, we can't even get into the question of how big this parkland dedication will be. Like, We are literally nowhere near that point, so.
Not even talking. And one other question. So on the other side of Plessy there, so that's the MPI, the Auto Pact has their compound
Yeah.
there. Do you think that would affect what, so if that's your neighbor across the street, so building large, low-density housing along Plessy, does it seem like it might be more likely that right on that frontage, they might probably go for denser or maybe light commercial or something? I'm just speculating here, but having your neighbor across the street being
Yeah.
kind of,
So I have to go with what the structure plan is saying. I can't assume what will be there.
yeah,
I see what you're saying,
possibility.
that there could be some type of transition there, but I can't see that being there because I know that that compound has been there for a long time.
Yeah.
I remember going for auctions there. So this structure area plan came in about 10 years ago. So in terms of what the structure plan proposed, it took into account what was sitting there in Springfield.
Okay, I think that's all my questions.
Ed, questions?
Well, you're saying that the timing of development affects the value of the property.
Correct.
And we're looking at two properties side by side here.
Yeah.
Is it fair to assume that both properties would likely be developed at about the same time?
In terms of the ones down by Sage Creek,
No, the property, the subject property and Comp One.
oh, yes, probably. That's the assumption, What we were just talking about is that the development is moving eastward. So yes, because these two parcels are right beside each other, and again, that parkland dedication also goes into the comp 1 or 2, index 2. So a little piece of it is also there. So the assumption is that yes, they're gonna put in the roads at the same time for both parcels. But again, the timing is relevant because we're saying both are gonna be developed around the same time. Hence the reason that is the best comparison. The other ones, the timelines are just not relevant. And the assessor's comparables, she does use the same property that I use, but the other ones, again, there's some size differences, there's some locational differences, and in terms of their, timelines of subdivision, I just don't know what, I didn't look into those sales simply because they were that much smaller.
Okay, thank you.
Neil?
Is there a plan of subdivision yet for these properties?
No.
No, so no one sketched their, out how they might lay it out or anything like
No.
that?
That we did all the research on that. We checked with Qualico. If they had a plan of subdivision, I would have brought it here with me. Nothing is there. It's just raw land. I don't know if they cut it and somebody uses the drains for something. We're not suggesting there should be farm use on it, but that's about all that's being done with it.
Yeah, it looks like it might be, in the aerial photos, it looks like it's being used as farmland of some sort there. Okay, I have no more questions.
Seeing as the land is being zoned as RR5 rural, what do you think the odds would be that the city would allow that to happen?
Very small, and that's not what I'm suggesting.
No.
The Transcona West Structure Area Plan kind of tells us what's going to happen here. What they can't tell us is the timelines,
Yeah.
and that's where the difference in prices lies.
And it's still zoned as agricultural.
It's zoned RR5. I believe the class.
The use is agricultural.
Yeah,
correct?
the
It has
use
a-
is,
it
yeah,
has a class.
vacant agricultural.
Yeah. So my question to that, well, either one of you could answer it, I guess, but under the act, does it not allow the city at the time of the redevelopment to go back 5 years?
It's not under farm use
It's
right
not
now.
under farm use, yeah.
That was changed with the supplementary.
That's what the supplementary is about, yes.
So we took
Yeah.
off the farm use, and so their liability went up. Well,
Yeah.
it's still low, but it's not farm use, so the value of the acreage went
Exactly.
down. So it's a class code, that's
30.
30, we use
Yeah.
30. So it's a 26% portioning, rather than, it's not like other, which would be
Yeah.
60, but it's, we're still giving them that. But they're not actual farming, or they haven't claimed to, so, and then, we did have that on previously, and there was a small replot done, a small sliver of
The
land.
sliver
came
that
off.
was done for the improvements of the railway crossing and, I forget what it is, Gun Road, but it was mainly the
So
railroad
just
crossing that
shaving
they
off
were
that.
improving there.
Yeah,
So they
when
took that
happened,
sliver of land for $1.
And then we got rid of the farm use, and here we are.
That's when you got rid of the farm use.
Yeah.
But you still have, at the time of redevelopment, an opportunity to go back, even
Yeah,
though
I guess
you've done it now.
technically they do.
5
because
years,
within
correct?
5 years. I
So
don't know
if
the
they
city.
did a redevelopment plan,
Yeah.
then you can go
At
back.
that point.
At that point, you can go back to 5 years.
The city could, yeah. I don't think they traditionally do that very often.
Every time they can. The one land, the first one, you didn't really use it anyway, the one in St. Norbert.
No, I thought that there was too many issues in terms of the riverbank, and,
It's outside of the
Flooding.
prime, you're aware it's outside of the primary dike, right?
yeah.
Is that-
Again, I didn't even include it in my commentary, simply because it was a sale that, I only used it because of the size of it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what it demonstrates is that there's very little demand for that parcel of land, hence the price.
It'll never be built.
Yeah,
It was part of a global sale of that entire parcel, so you didn't break it down. Anyway, we'll leave it at that, I can't produce ideas. The other one that you had, the parcel 3,
yes. The four?
parcel 3?
Yeah, it
In-
includes
in-
4
index
roll
four,
numbers.
yeah.
Yeah.
It includes 4?
Yes, there's 4 roll numbers if you.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4 roll numbers.
Yeah.
That one you found was a little high for what reason?
So that one, the timeline from the purchase of the property to the first steps in terms of the development process was about a year. So again, this is dealing with this issue of timing. This is what is driving up the price, is that there's a very small horizon in terms of the development. So also, look at its location. I mean, it is right beside Lagimodier, or close to Lagimodier. It would have higher demand simply because it is that much closer to Lage. But the main issue is the timing. When you're talking about a horizon of 1 year, a few months, or 2 years, you're gonna drive that price up, versus a property that's gonna be developed 5, 6, or 10 years down the road. This is what I'm trying to emphasize.
Okay, thank you. That'll conclude the matter on that one. I guess the next one you're presenting the exact same information on,
Yeah.
just changing the number at the end,
I
right?
think there's one additional sale.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one then, and that'll be, once I find it. That'll be the next qualified one, Plessy Road. Okay,
Okay, so it's the same
You're up.
subject, different reference period. The assessment for 2018 is based on a reference date of April 1st, 2016. Again, the comparables are all vacant lands in the north of the city that were unserviced at time of sale. And I have sort of the same format where the location of the 4 comparables is shown on the next page, and then close-up pictures on subsequent pages. Comparable number 1 is on Ravelstone Avenue. It's a smaller lot, 8.52 acres. Immediately west of Lagimodier. It had no frontage on any existing street at time of sale. It sold for $124,995 per acre. Comparable number 2, 349 Ravenhurst, a larger lot at 72 acres, located at the edge of Canterbury Park, corner of Duggold and East Perimeter. It is adjacent to industrial property and sold May 2015 for $4,500,000 or $62,453 per acre. Comparable 3 is on Pipeline Road, further just north of Templeton on Pipeline. It sold May 15th for $900,000 or $108,173 per acre. It's that's lot size, 8.32 acres lot size for that one. And comparable 4 is on King Edward Street. It's 119 acres. Sold January 2015 for $7,588,636 or $63,671 per acre. So again, these comparables are similar to the subject, and they're vacant, unserviced lots. They're in the northeastern section of the city. Their lot sizes range from 8 acres to 119 acres, which bracket the subject of 29.84 acres. Their sale price per acre range is $124,999 to $62,453, bracketing the subject's assessed value of $75,779.09. And that way support the assessment of the subject at $2,261,000. Completes my brief.
Martel, questions?
Okay, yes, in terms of the 2 parcels that are 8.52 and 8.32 acres, do you think that those are comparable in terms of their size?
I think you have, with land, it's you don't have the normal cookie cutters like residential houses can sometimes be, so what I did was make a bracket here, so we do have the larger, which is economies of scale generally, amongst other things, lower sale price per acre.
And
So,
the King Edward Street one, that, just by looking at the picture, that actually extends all the way out to, okay, so we have Jefferson here, to King Edward. That's straight agricultural land that has no future commercial development potential?
It is agricultural, it is a large.
Okay, I'm just asking that because I believe south of that is mainly commercial, I believe.
Comparable 3.
It's the last comparable 4. Yeah.
Okay.
King Edward Street.
Pictures showing residential development.
That's Waterford Estates.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is it Waterford Estates?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, not much is happening out further.
Do you know what the timeline is in terms of subdivision?
No, nothing is, no permits are taken out right now.
Okay, okay, that's fine, thank you.
Neil?
The comparable 3 on Pipeline there. And typically, if you're looking at a parcel that you need to fill in your subdivision, you might be willing to pay a little bit more to acquire that land. Is that correct?
That sounds correct.
It's the last
I don't know if
piece.
that's an assemblage or not, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
I'm not, I couldn't answer that.
And comparable 4, agricultural land. I don't know if there's any plans, certainly nothing.
That part, that might be a speculation.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, no other questions.
Ed?
Well, of your 4 comps, 2 of them are similar to the subject property in that they have a rail line next door, right? Would that be a factor that would be relevant in comp 2 and 4 relative to the subject property?
wasn't focusing on the rail line, it's more the, trying to bracket the size, trying to, vacant unserviced is an important part, and looking for the comparables here. The frontage, yeah, if there was no street frontage, I think the rail line's on one side, but you do have the street frontage to counterbalance that, that's,
So there's
more
no,
important.
like in the previous one, we had talked about, or he had talked about
Yeah, the-
setback requirements, a
Yeah.
loss of 3 acres, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that'll be a consideration with development, with the rail lines there.
No further questions.
Your number one comp, that got the development agreement on it already then?
Yeah, it's going ahead. Yeah, the Chelsea Road is being built up.
It was it already approved for redevelopment when they bought it?
It wasn't in our, I didn't see any permits or rezoning applications, at the time of purchase. Like I say, when it was, which one is this? I mean, yeah, so at the time of sale, none of the Altossi hadn't been pushed through yet. It was just, they don't know the stone.
What's the date on this picture then?
This picture is, 2016, would be 2016.
2016? So it's within a year of the purchase, correct?
Yeah.
Well,
Close
the
to-
sale was done 2015. This is 2016, it's already got the pictures of the lots in it.
Yeah, well, that's a tricky thing. I know there is development.
That's why I'm asking you about the development agreement.
Because I see, can't seem to push that away if it's just gonna, like those roadways, whether they're there or not, they're gonna show them.
Mhm.
I know El Tassi is developed, let me look up for you again. I
Look
couldn't
us up.
confirm the timeline on that for you, sorry.
But your picture does confirm that there was a plan in place
Yeah,
in 16.
yes, definitely 16,
That's
yeah.
where I was going.
16.
And your comp 2, you said you did not have a development agreement on that one?
Reading first. No permits there.
No permits on that. Okay. And 3 was no permits either?
No.
No permit, no permit. And 4, you said no permit as well? Still ag. Thank you. On with your presentation then, Marcello?
Okay. I'll just ask you to skip to page 6 of the presentation. You can see that I've used some of the similar sales.
Yep.
I've included an extra one, which is actually the assessor's comparable 2. Okay. So this is index, sorry.
Which
index
one is it
6.
on your sheet then?
It's index 6.
Index 6, the last one?
Yeah, 72.5 acres, 0.05 acres. So this is located on the east of Ravenhurst and north of the CPR main line and west of, I think this actually might be CN. And west of the perimeter highway. The parcel is approximately 72.5 acres and sold in May of 2015. At the time of sale, there were no services in place. Index 5, in our opinion, represents the high end of the market. The development application came in September of 2017. This is again trying to demonstrate that upward pressure on land values when the timing horizon is relatively quick. So I'll just skip to the commentary here. So the more relevant sales are indices 2, 3, and 6. Taking into account that certain sales were influenced by the timing of development. And again, we made sure that we looked at sales selection, timing, and development, RR5 zoning. Index 2 I've gone into already. It's the location. It has the most relevance in terms of the the property. We had to go through an exercise of trying to find some way of inflating these values. We think that the new home price index is a good tool to use because it is, again, looking at contractor prices. So that is, in our opinion, a good estimate of how land prices are inflating month by month, because the index actually calculates this on a monthly basis. So we've adjusted it higher to $35,756 per acre. Index 3, again, is the same index, 1.5 kilometers away. This is the one that's closer to La Jemaudier with the 4 sales, or the 4 roll numbers that were included in this one. Again, you know the horizon on this one already, it's about a year. So again, that, in our opinion, affects the price. Index 4 is not as relevant in terms of location, but it's also a good way of demonstrating how timing works, because again, here we have Index 4 and Index 5 showing you how timing is having an effect on the price. And again, I think I've alluded to that 265% increase in terms of land value between these 2 sites that are right beside each other. And the sales were only 2 years apart. So, I mean, I can say, I don't think the land price would have increased by 265% in 2 years. Index 6 is 72.5 acres. In terms of the size, it's slightly larger than our property. Again, in terms of the horizon here, we're talking about a sale that occurred in May of 2015. The application came in September of 2017. The process was probably in the works during that time frame. So we know that the time frame in terms of the development was much smaller for this property than our subject. And we've alluded to our subject being still quite a few years away from development. So that is where the differences in prices lie. Timing is of the essence in terms of development lands. Regarding the King Edward, I certainly didn't look at it. I tried to stick to the other side of the city, but I simply don't know enough about that sale. The sale prices, to me, in my opinion, it's a reflective of something that has a smaller horizon in terms of development. I can't be 100% sure because I haven't looked into the sale. But that is what the trend is showing, is that when there is a shorter horizon in terms of development, there is that upward pressure on price. And you can see the difference in price versus the Ravenhurst and King Edward. So one is at 63,000 and change, and the other one is at 62,000 and change. Again, that to me is suggesting that the time frame of horizon, or that horizon, is much smaller. So I would wager to guess that the King Edward property is probably on the cusp of being developed, if it hasn't already had some type of application put in. So that's my presentation.
Questions?
No.
Ed?
No questions, thanks.
Neil?
Okay, and I'm hearing your argument about proximity to development being important. Now we're, compared to the previous cycle, we're 2 years closer to development. Does that mean that your price index that you're using is not necessarily reliable for this property?
The price index is looking at development, okay? So because it's taking into account contractor prices, the assumption is that these houses are being developed in developments. So it's looking at inflation of lands in developments. I've applied that inflationary factor to lands that essentially aren't developed. But that's the best measure that I think we have in terms of how prices are increasing for lands that are essentially going to be developed at some point. I don't think there's anything else. There's not enough paired sales. There's no paired sales out there. So this is a good reflection of what's happening on a property that a builder takes, buys, and sells at some point. They're taking into account, they're splitting up between the land value that they purchased it at, the cost of building it, and then combining the two. There's three figures in that index. If you look at it, there's the total price, there's the house price, and there's the land price. They've split it up. So I can look specifically at land in that index and see how it's changing over time. Now, what I alluded to is that that index is done on a monthly basis. It's not looking at things on an annual or quarterly or whatever basis. It's looking at it month to month. So we have a good idea of what inflation is, the inflation is on these lots on a monthly basis over however many periods, because the index goes back to the early 80s. That is how the index works.
Okay. All right, no more questions.
And I've got none. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Can we take a 5-minute, please? Break?
Good idea.
We'll call the meeting back to order. Catherine, I guess we're gonna start with Creekside. You got a rec on that,
Yeah, do you want the roll number?
please?
Okay. So 16 Creekside Road with roll number 03092983005. The recommendation is to reduce the assessment to $470,000 to better represent the April 1st, 2016 market value, reduced from $526,000. Recommendation accepted by owner Mr. Wang by phone.
Any questions, panel members?
No.
None? Good, thank you. Next one would be,
There's no other recommendations.
You still need to.
we still need to read them on.
Oh,
Yes, please. Just the roll number.
Just the roll number and the address.
this is different again.
Yep, we changed.
So there's, for 51 Wildwood Park, it's, there's a 2018 and 19, which are both the same reference here.
Excuse me.
51 Wildwood East Park, roll number 03018365000. The assessment is $576,000 for 2018. I'm maintaining that for 18 and 19.
Thank you. The next one would be Wildwood Park again.
Yeah, so 8 Karen Urban Crescent in River Park South.
That's the same value.
Roll number 08081222575, and maintaining the assessment of $520,000 for 2018-19.
576,000.
She did it.
520.
Yeah.
She's doing this one.
Okay, good.
520.
520?
520,000.
Okay. And that's it.
And that's it.
Thank you very much. You have a great day.